Novak Djokovic just pulled out of a tournament, and the reason he gave is more suspicious than any injury update could ever be. No wrist problem, no knee issue, no hamstring strain. When Djokovic withdrew from the Cincinnati Open this week, the official explanation given to tournament organizers was simply this: non-medical reasons. Think about that phrase for a second. In a sport where every withdrawal usually comes wrapped in a medical bulletin, inflammation here, a strain there, a scan showing this or that, Djokovic offered nothing. No diagnosis, no prognosis, no timeline. Just two words that raise about 100 more questions than they answer. And here's what makes this genuinely alarming rather than just mildly curious. This is Novak Djokovic we're talking about. 24 Grand Slam titles. A man who has played through injuries that would have ended most careers. Who has taped up battered bodies and walked back onto court, because that's simply who he is. This is not a player who skips tournaments lightly. So when he skips one and refuses to even give a physical reason why, tennis fans have every right to ask, what exactly is going on here? Because the timing could not be worse, or more telling. Djokovic hasn't played a single competitive match since his straight sets Wimbledon semifinal loss to Jannik Sinner back in July. That defeat came just 2 days after he took what he himself described as a nasty and awkward fall during his quarterfinal win, an injury serious enough that he needed on-court treatment to his upper leg. He looked compromised in that Sinner match, visibly slower, visibly guarded, and now, weeks later, with the US Open bearing down on him, he's choosing to skip his only remaining tune-up tournament and refusing to say why. So which is it? Is this really non-medical, exactly as stated? Or is something being deliberately left off the record? Something Djokovic's team doesn't want circulating in headlines before he even sets foot in New York. Let's look at the trail of clues. Because when a player as forthcoming as Djokovic usually is suddenly goes vague, the details around the announcement start to matter more than the announcement itself. Start with the fall. During his Wimbledon quarterfinal, Djokovic took what he called a nasty and awkward tumble in the final game of the match. He needed treatment from a trainer on his upper leg right there on court. He still won that match, vintage Djokovic, grinding through discomfort because that's what he's always done. But 2 days later, in the semifinal against Sinner, something was clearly off. He looked slower moving side to side. He looked guarded on shots that would normally be routine for him. He lost in straight sets. Not a nail-biter, not a 5-set war, but a comprehensive defeat against a player he has beaten plenty of times before when healthy. Straight sets. Against Sinner. That result alone should have raised eyebrows. And then, nothing. No update on the leg. No follow-up statement about how the recovery was going. Just silence for weeks. All the way up until the moment Cincinnati organizers announced his withdrawal, with that now infamous phrase attached: non-medical reasons. Here's why that phrasing specifically matters so much. In professional tennis, non-medical is often tournament speak for something the player doesn't want scrutinized. Sometimes it really is as simple as rest, scheduling, or a mental break. But it can also be a convenient shield, a way of avoiding the follow-up questions that come with any specific injury claim. No reporter can ask, "How's the leg healing?" if the official line is that the leg was never the issue in the first place. So which version of Djokovic are we watching right now? Is this a 38-year-old veteran, smart enough after 2 decades on tour to know exactly when his body needs a real reset, choosing rest on his own terms rather than being forced into it by a worsening injury? Or is this a champion managing the optics of a physical decline he isn't ready to admit publicly, dressing up a lingering issue from that Wimbledon fall as a simple scheduling choice? Either answer should concern his fans. One means his body may be breaking down in ways his team wants to control the narrative around. The other means, at nearly 38 years old, he's already making the kind of calculated withdrawals that mark the final stretch of a legendary career. Now let's talk about what this actually means for the US Open. Because a mystery withdrawal is one thing, but the timing puts Djokovic in almost exactly the same dangerous position as Carlos Alcaraz, just for entirely different reasons. Cincinnati was Djokovic's last realistic chance to get live match play before the year's final Grand Slam. No injury bulletin, no rehab timeline, no clear picture of what's actually going on physically, just an empty spot on the schedule where real preparation should have been. That means Djokovic will walk into New York having not played a single competitive match since that Wimbledon semifinal loss to Sinner in July. By the time the US Open begins, that's close to a month and a half of total silence from a man who is, by his own recent admission, no longer the player who can simply out-athlete the rest of the field. At 38 years old, that gap matters differently than it would for Alcaraz. This isn't a young player who can shake off rust through sheer physical talent. This is a veteran whose entire game in recent years has been built on precision, anticipation, and match-hardened instincts. The very things that erode fastest without live competition. A month and a half without a match is not a minor inconvenience for Djokovic. It's a real risk to whatever rhythm he had left. And here's where the non-medical explanation becomes almost more concerning than a straightforward injury would have been. If this were simply a hamstring strain or a knee issue, at least fans and analysts would know what they're dealing with. A defined problem with a defined recovery process. Instead, we're left guessing. Is his body simply worn down after 2 decades of brutal, sustained competition at the highest level? Is this a deliberate, calculated choice to prioritize energy for one final serious Grand Slam run rather than spreading himself thin? Or is there something more specific? Something his team genuinely doesn't want made public before New York? Precisely because a public health story on a 24-time Grand Slam champion would dominate headlines and pile on pressure he doesn't want walking in. Every explanation carries its own kind of concern. If it's simply fatigue and calculated rest, that's a 38-year-old body openly telling its owner it can no longer handle a full, unbroken competitive calendar the way it once did. A sign, whether anyone wants to say it directly or not, that the end of this era really is getting closer. If it's something being deliberately obscured, that's arguably worse. A champion managing a narrative, rather than being upfront with the fans who have followed every step of this remarkable career. Either way, Djokovic now arrives in New York with almost no data point to judge him by. No recent match tape. No clear health status. Nothing except a vague phrase and a fall from Wimbledon that never seemed to get fully explained. So what actually happens now for Djokovic? Let's lay out the realistic scenarios, because a mystery withdrawal like this leaves fans with far more open questions than a normal injury update ever would. Scenario 1. This really was simple, calculated rest. A 38-year-old body, aware of exactly what it can and can't handle anymore, choosing to skip a Masters 1000 event in order to arrive at the US Open with fresher legs and a clearer head, even if that means walking in without any recent match play. Veterans have done this before. Sometimes the smartest move for an aging champion isn't more tennis, it's less of it, saved up for the one tournament that actually matters. Scenario 2. The Wimbledon fall never fully healed the way his team hoped, and, non-medical reasons, is simply the safest possible language to use while managing a lingering physical issue away from public scrutiny. If that's the case, Djokovic could be walking into New York carrying exactly the kind of unresolved injury that tends to resurface under the pressure of best-of-5 tennis. The same pressure that finished off plenty of great champions before him. Scenario 3, and maybe the most uncomfortable one to say out loud, this is simply what the tail end of a legendary career starts to look like. Fewer tournaments, more selective scheduling, vaguer explanations. Because the full truth, a body that's finally, gradually breaking down after 2 decades of the most physically demanding era the sport has ever seen, isn't something even Djokovic wants to confirm in a press release. Whichever scenario turns out to be true, the practical reality is identical. Djokovic arrives in New York with no recent match tape, no clear health status, and a field that includes a red-hot Sinner and a newly crowned major champion in Zverev, both playing with total confidence, both sharper than they've been all season. Djokovic, meanwhile, is a complete unknown. Not because he lacks talent or big match experience, he has more of both than anyone in the draw, but because nobody, not even the most seasoned analysts, has enough recent information to say with any confidence what version of him is going to show up. And that uncertainty cuts both ways. It could mean an early, disappointing exit from a legend who simply ran out of gas before the tournament even started. Or it could mean the opposite, a rested, hungry Djokovic, carrying no accumulated fatigue from a long summer swing, using that mystery to his advantage, and catching opponents off guard precisely because nobody knows what to expect. So where does this leave Novak Djokovic, less than a month away from a tournament that could define the final chapter of his career? There's something almost fitting, in a strange way, about a legend as guarded and calculated as Djokovic exiting a tournament with a reason nobody can fully verify. Throughout his career, Djokovic has controlled narratives, managed expectations, and often played his cards closer to his chest than almost any other champion in the sport. This withdrawal fits that pattern perfectly. Give away nothing, let speculation fill the silence, and let the results on court do whatever talking needs to be done. But speculation, in this case, isn't unreasonable. It's the natural response to a 24-time Grand Slam champion skipping his final tune-up before a major, offering no physical explanation, on the back of a Wimbledon exit that already looked physically compromised. Fans aren't inventing a controversy out of nothing. They're reading the only clues they've been given. What happens next will answer more than any statement could. If Djokovic walks into Arthur Ashe Stadium and looks sharp, mobile, and dangerous, the non-medical reasons story quietly becomes exactly what his team always claimed it was. Smart, calculated rest from a veteran who knows his body better than anyone. But if he looks slow, guarded, or visibly compromised in those early rounds, the questions will only intensify. Was there really nothing physical going on? Or was this always about managing a story his team didn't want written yet? Either way, one thing about this moment in Djokovic's career is impossible to ignore. The explanations are getting vaguer, the withdrawals are getting more frequent, and the era where Novak Djokovic simply outlasted and outworked every physical setback thrown at him may finally be entering its final unpredictable stretch. We're about to find out exactly what non-medical reasons really meant. New York doesn't lie.